amazing. Give it a lick.
It's just like raisins.
Have a stroke of its mane. It turns into a plane, and then it turns back again when you tug on its winky.
Ooh, that's dirty.
Do your thing so well, I better not show you where the lemonade is made. Sweet lemonade, sweet lemonade, sweet lemonade, yeah, sweet lemonade. Get on my horse, I'll take you round the universe and all the other places too.
Think you'll find that the universe pretty much covers everything.
Shut up, woman, get up my horse. Look at my horse is amazing.
Where is he now?
He's over there grazing, have a feel of his hoof. You'll find they're all bulletproof, and if that's not enough, then take a look at his ball sack.
Why is it purple?
Custom stylings, a ball sack looks fresh with a two-tone paint job. Don't you know now? Try this lemonade, sweet lemonade, sweet lemonade, yeah, sweet lemonade, 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 sweet lemonade. Get on my horse, I'll take you round the universe and all the other places too.
Think you'll find that the universe pretty much covers everything.
Shut up, woman, get up my horse.
And so, it begins. Dark were the skies, and chill was the wind, as the land was covered in an air of money. Across the hill did ride a dread army of the night, cloaked in mist and folds, prepared to rain down cash and destruction upon the land. And the people did form an orderly line, so that they too may purchase an imaginary horse. Just as it seemed all was lost, in strode a mighty Kotick, clad in shimmering money from head to toe. Wielding a terrible broadsword, he did claim their savings too, smashing their banks asunder with a righteous fury. And when the day was done, and the player base stripped of all their worldly goods, they did turn to each other and say, "We shall name this day in his honor. Please, sir, can I have some more?" The Kotick said one word that day. One man, one murky, 100,000 retarded Celestial Steeds. This is Blue Horse. It begins now. Yes, indeed, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Blue Please here on CynicalBrit.com with myself, TotalBiscuit. The date today is the 16th of April 2010, also known as Blue Horse Day, an official holiday for everybody, and children, and wives, and mothers, and husbands, and cousins, and everyone all over the world is celebrating the wonderful news that we can, in fact, pay money for an imaginary horse. Truly, it's astonishing, it's a revelation, it's unbelievable, and we'll be talking about it a little bit later on the show. Stop hitting my keyboard. What have we got in the show today? Well, yeah, so I may have maybe broken YouTube just a little bit. Yeah. Whoops. Oh well, never mind. If you haven't seen the video yet, I'd suggest you wait till after the show. If you haven't seen the video now, I'll be quite surprised, because it seems like everyone in the world has thus far. Ridiculous number of views. It's good, isn't it? It's so much fun to annoy people, infuriate them. It worked very well, honestly. Overall effectiveness of that particular troll was quite awesome. Yes. Right. What have I got coming up for the show today? Yeah, they'll be talking about the horse. Maybe not what you think. We'll see what we can do a little bit later on the show. Also, underwater. Apparently it's better where it's wetter, so I've been told. Under the sea. There'll be no accusations, just wonderful crustaceans under the sea. That's where we're going in Cataclysm, apparently. Submarines, naval combat, underwater stuff, oh my. Be talking about the name of the zone that I absolutely cannot pronounce in any possible respect a little bit later on in the show. And now that we are looking at all of the Cataclysm stuff, we're going to have a little bit of a look back at the triumphs and failures of Wrath of the Lich King, and what we have to look forward to, and what I hope will change. Yes, indeed, we're talking about that a little bit later on the show. Also, your chance to contribute to the show, it is the illusion of choice. Wait, what that? No, Kotick, no! Yes, indeed, your chance to contribute to the show, email the Murloc at cynicalbrit.com. That is the Murloc at cynicalbrit.com. Pick a topic. If it's good, I might talk about it. If it's not, I probably won't. If it's really bad, I might get very upset. However, let me take this opportunity to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that this episode of Blue Please is brought to you by First Person Leisure, a new gaming podcast that reviews console, computer, card, and board games. Each episode reviews games with an emphasis on providing a humorous presentation and entertainment. Go check it out at firstpersonleisure.com. Now that that's out of the way, let's shill something else, why not? So, I got an email. I was actually talking to Drewby, the guy behind the series known as The Grind. They have a new trailer out for episode 3. Long time coming. Drewby is a lazy bugger, one might say. Go check it out. I shall give you the link in the chat room, and I'll create a nice, easy link for the rest of you to follow. I'll also put it in the show notes, and indeed embed it into the archive page for cynicalbrit.com. In the meantime, let's give you a link. Head over to tinyurl.com/thegrind3trailer. Yes, indeed. tinyurl.com/thegrind3trailer. You can go and have a look at that. I said I'd promote it. He was a little bit upset that his trailer hadn't got as many views as That Retarded Horse. So, here you go. Here's a plug for you. Go and have a look at that. The Grind's always great. And Keith and Drewby do that one. I believe I guest starred in one of those, actually. Come to think of it. Yes, I did, as I recall. I believe I was shouting a lot. Sounds appropriate for me. Anyway, ladies and gents, without further ado, it's time for this.
Mail time! That sounds like it's mail time! Here's the mail.
It never fails.
It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes,
I want to wail.
Yes, indeed, folks, it's time for the mail. Unsurprisingly, it involves reading it. Surprising, isn't it? Crazy. Unbelievable. Let's start it off right now, shall we? Do I really want to read that one? I don't know. Yeah, why not? Why not? Let's read it. It's about the retarded horse. It's from Marduk, and he says this. Hail, TotalBiscuit, Lord of God of Trolling and Bane of Entitled Casuals. Yes, flattery will get you everywhere. With regards to that retarded horse, who would have thought that such a simple video would have the scrubs in such furor? Great job with the video. I would like to direct my hate towards Acti Blizzard, but the simple fact of the matter is that if it weren't for the stupids that buy into these microtransactions, then the pet/mount store wouldn't exist. Of course, the typical argument for these horse owners is either, lol, you is poor and can't afford $25 zong, or shut up, insert homophobic insult of your choice. It worries me when the player base has devolved into such a state. I remember the good old days, nostalgia, when gamers tended to stick together since it was a niche market. I think that really stopped in 1986, just FYI. A subculture often mocked or shunned by society at large. It still is. The fact that it is now more mainstream has rendered places like the WoW forums uninhabitable by people with IQs that exceed their shoe size, and is encouraging developers to tag a price on any old tat that a designer threw together during a lunch break and cash in. With DLC becoming more and more popular, I am concerned that games sold in stores will soon be bare-bones versions, with extra DLC required to play the complete experience. I don't have a problem with DLC per se. Additional content is fine, but slippery slope and all that. Bear in mind, slippery slope can be a bit of a fallacy. Anyway, I've ranted long enough. I'll return to sighing at everyone that I see with that retarded horse in-game, then laughing at the whispers they send me. Fare thee well. I can understand, honestly, I can understand why people would be concerned about the state of gaming as it happens. Yes, it is entirely possible that bare-bones versions will be released. There has been a lot of drama regarding the release of StarCraft 2, the way that that's going to be done. People are saying, oh, it's a bare-bones version. You're not getting the full experience because you're splitting it into 3. Well, I mean, that's nonsense, honestly. Have you seen the length of the Terran campaign? It's huge. It's going to be 29 full-length missions. That's massive. That's longer than all of StarCraft 1 put together. And it's got a whole bunch of crazy stuff in it. So, I don't think that's going to happen for a little while, honestly. And to be honest, because of the amount of competition now, I would say that gamers will vote with their feet if they have any sense whatsoever. We've seen there are certain games that provide a lot of good content, a lot of good value. They have done well in the marketplace. Dragon Age Origins, prime example there, sold very well. And I would hope to see more success from games like that in the future, quite honestly. As to whether or not WoW's going to go down this route, well, we've seen that they can sell a ton of them, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'll talk about that a little bit later on the show. Yes, indeed. Right, let's go and have a look at another email. We've got plenty in the mailbag to have a look at. So, this one is coming from Sumpoir, and he says this. Greetings, host of shows! I was listening to your talk about the usefulness of flasks over the years and thought I would give you my thoughts on the subject. Considering how cheap and mainstream flasks are these days, I wonder, why does Blizzard not just buff the classes outright? One possible solution for making flasks more useful is to have them grant proc-style buffs or debuffs. For example, a tanking flask can sometimes shield you for X amount of damage. A caster flask can give you a chance on direct damage spell hit to refresh all your dots on the target. Melee damage flask can give you a chance to increase your attack speed by X%. Another possible and simpler solution is to make flasks grant percentage-based buffs. That way they can scale with gear. They would have to have diminishing returns past the current level cap to prevent old flasks from being used with the latest expansion. Keep up the great shows. Yeah. A few interesting points. Firstly, don't just buff the classes altogether. The point of flasks... Blizzard has lost sight of this slightly because they made flasks a little bit too easy to acquire and not quite as good as they used to be. The point of flasks is to provide an optional buff for people that want it. A leg up for those who are willing to invest. Now, back in the day, that's how it used to be. Flasks of Supreme Power were pricey. Extremely pricey, ladies and gentlemen. And that's not good, because that meant that a lot of guilds didn't use them. But then I suppose you could turn it around and argue, hang on a sec, they're not supposed to be using it if they're not willing to dedicate the money to it. Flasks were for the hardest of the hardcore. I'm not sure if that really applies anymore. I think that the way that raiding has evolved has changed somewhat. Now everyone gets access to everything, so I don't suppose that there's really that exclusivity to the flask anymore. It used to be something that only the hardcore guilds used because it was pricey, because it's expensive. It's not so much anymore. Although, I do see your point. What is the purpose of this thing anymore if everyone can be assumed to have one by default? It makes me wonder, actually, whether or not Blizzard balanced those encounters around assuming that everyone is flasked up. I mean, we've already seen that they make certain assumptions as to class balance. Like, we assume that you have a certain number of healers, a certain number of tanks. We assume that you have a bloodlust. Now, they've tried to cut down on that a little bit in the past, but it makes me wonder if they assume that you're flasked up or not. I wonder if hard modes, perhaps, have this assumption in there by default, that, of course, people that are trying hard modes are flasked. Now, I like the idea of procs, honestly. I think that there's not enough exciting procs in the game these days. It would be nice to see that kind of happen, but then again, it also becomes difficult to balance an encounter when you have random procs enter the mix. You can average them out over a period of time, but then you've got to bear in mind, well, who's going to use it, who's not. Some people are going to use the flask because it's more beneficial. I mean, that's already the case. You've got certain classes that just don't really bother with flasks as much because it's simply not as beneficial as it would be to, say, another class. I don't know, it might be interesting, honestly. I can't really deny as to whether or not I would approve of it, because, hey, it's a little bit crazy. But I do agree that flasks have somewhat, let's just say, diminished in usefulness over the course of the last couple of years. Now, last but not least, this one is from Andel Schwepp, and he says this: I was listening to your podcast last week and someone sent in an email about going too fast in heroics, and I have to agree with him or her. You have some points, but not all of them are right in my opinion. You said you're there for frost badges. Not everyone is. I have 2 alts, and I'm trying to get my welfare epics on them, and both of them are tanks. I can do fine keeping aggro, but I refuse to be rushed over a speed I'm comfortable with. And no amount of go faster, hurry, and I have limited time is going to make me rush. If you want a speed run, then that's fine. Find others with the same wish, like people from your guild. It's how I do it on my hunter. Not everyone is there to be rushed because you want to, and that is for everyone who shouts speedrun at the start of the HC. I tell them I'm not there to be rushed. I will go at my please. Leave if you have any problems with that. Well, here's the thing. As a tank, you're in a rather unique position to dictate that. The tank sets the speed. That said, if a tank is hanging around for 50 minutes in a dungeon, they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to saunter along, I'm going to stand there for a while, I'm not going to pull at the speed I should be pulling at, then you suck. And it's as simple as that. You are a bane upon the rest of your group. You are a albatross around their neck, an ankle weight around their ankle. Yeah. That's not good. That is disrespectful to everyone else in the group. I'm sorry, it is. You can make every excuse you want, but at the end of the day, if you're trying to gear up your ults, surely you want to get those badges as quickly as possible. Right? That's just common sense, right? You want efficiency. Surely that's the way to do it. At the end of the day, you're hurting your group and yourself by slacking. Simple as that. That said, I'm not saying that you are slacking. I'm just saying that speedrun, quote-unquote, is a pointless moniker. Speedrun doesn't exist anymore. We're talking about either you do the instance properly at an appropriate speed or you don't. You don't have to sit down and mana break anymore the way that you used to. So what's the excuse of standing around? So just pull. Keep pulling. If your healer can manage it, if your tank can manage it, if your DPS can manage it, why not keep pulling? That's the proper way to do things now. It didn't used to be. You used to have to be careful. I liked that. Back in the day in Burning Crusade, I would have agreed with you that you should take a somewhat reasonable pace with things. But now, there is not a single challenging heroic in the entire game. Not one. Not one 5-man, ladies and gentlemen. Not anymore. Not after the nerfs. Everyone's overgeared for these damn things. There is no excuse not to chain pull. It's as simple as that. And if you're not chain pulling, if you're not at least pulling at a reasonable pace, if you're standing around and doing nothing, holding up the rest of your group, then I'm sorry, you are the problem. Simple as that. I don't care if you're listening or not. You are the problem. There is no excuse for that kind of behaviour. It is disrespectful to everyone else's time. And yours as well. I mean, that's the stupid thing about it. You want to gear up an alt, and you say, oh, well, not everyone's there for frost badges. No, everyone is there for frost badges, one way or the other. You say you're gearing up alts, well, what better way to gear them up with some damn tier 10? You say you're not going to spend those frost badges when you get them? That's nonsense. You're there for frost badges like everybody else is. You just happen to need Triumph as well. Good for you. You need Triumph, you're gearing up an alt, fine. Not a problem. But that doesn't mean you get to drag everyone else down and be dead weight on the group. That is just selfish. Simple as that. My name is TotalBiscuit. You're listening to Blue Please here on CynicalBrit.com. I'll be back after the break to talk about that retarded horse. A conspiracy, perhaps. Oh, yes. Enjoy. You're listening to the podcast, an archive of Blue Please. Music was removed to comply with copyright law. If you'd like to hear the music, tune into the live stream on Fridays at 8 p.m. GMT. That's 3 p.m. EST, only on CynicalBrit.com. And now for the latest in raiding news. A union of all the bosses in Northrend is protesting outside of Azeroth's highest court, demanding that a huge number of guilds be banned for what they called leet hacks. We spoke to the leader of the group, Mr. Putricide, who had this to say. Terrible news, everyone! We're getting steamrolled on a weekly basis by thousands of guilds, and it's all because of UGT Ventrilo servers. Crystal clear, low-latency voice-over IP allows guilds to communicate quickly and effectively, so they can down bosses with ease.
Sir?
What is it, Rodface?
We have a UGT server too, sir! We got it from UGT-servers.com!
What? Why wasn't I invited?
Well, Arthur said you were too cheery, and he's concerned that your malleable goo will stain the carpet.
Your guild is a community, and communities want to stay in touch. Whether you're in an intense arena match, an epic raid, or just hanging out and shooting the breeze, you need an always-on Ventrilo server from UGT-servers.com. Crystal clear quality, low latency, and of course, low prices. UGT-servers.com are so good, they should be considered an exploit. Get yours today. Yes, indeed, folks, Blizzard have answered your prayers. Gear score is a thing of the past, thanks to the new, innovative way to tell at a glance whether or not a player should be part of your raid group. Introducing TRH, short for That Retarded Horse. That Retarded Horse is the ideal way to quickly determine who shouldn't be in your group, with no mods required. Simply use your eyes. These are usually located in the front of your face. Direct your eyes at your game screen and observe the prospective player. Is he sitting on a dumb-looking impractical horse that he bought with real money? A reskin that he willingly sat in a queue for hours in order to purchase with actual cash? If yes, then there is no need to invite that player. That Retarded Horse will tell you all you need to know about potential pug members in an incredibly efficient manner. It's perfect for raid leaders, puggers, and even guild masters. Does a guildie have that Retarded Horse? Then bust them down to bencher, sonny. Want to get back into drama llama within your guild? Tell his wife/girlfriend, okay, who am I kidding? Mother, sister, friends, about how he spent real money on that retarded horse. Sit back and watch the fireworks. It's astounding. It's amazing. It's best of all. Free to use with no downloads required. Ladies and gentlemen, celebrate. Dance on the rooftops for the age of TRH. That retarded horse has arrived. So Ghostcrawler promised us a pony, and this was what he gave us. Ladies and gentlemen, that retarded horse. The Celestial Steed, as it's called. Brand new addition to the Blizzard store. The most expensive addition to the Blizzard store, I might add. Now, let me get this out of the way first. As ridiculous as it is to see 500,000 that retarded horse all over the place, then that's not the issue. That's not the biggest issue. If you want that retarded horse, you go and buy that retarded horse. I don't care if you decide to spend your money on that retarded horse, or give it to a horse charity, or buy a horse to eat. If you wish to have a horse burger, I am absolutely fine with that. You wish to shout yourself horse at my video? Nay! If you wish to shout yourself horse at Blizzard, do whatever the hell you want. I don't care. It's your time, it's your money. That's not the concern here, let's be honest. That is not the concern at all. I mean, we'll start with the fact that this thing looks like absolute garbage. I'm sorry. So if you go and have a look at my video, just turn the volume off. If you haven't seen the Celestial Steed, this video, I've got WoW on Ultra with everything turned up to max, 720p, just have a look on YouTube. Go and have a look at that video. You can go find it on my YouTube channel, Total Halibut on YouTube, youtube.com/Total Halibut. Go and have a look at that. You'll see the horse. That's the horse on absolute maximum graphical settings. It's garbage! It is awful! I mean, look at that stupid bloody thing. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is a reskin of Invincible. Now, Invincible is a mount that you can get from killing Lich King... Yeah, it's Lich King... Either Lich King or Lich King Hard Mode, I can't remember which. Whatever the case, it's rare as hell, ladies and gents. So what do they try and do? Well, they decided to reskin it. And they decided to reskin it by just taking the Algernon skin and slapping it on there. That's effectively what it is. I mean, just look at it. It's Algernon, and yes, I'm saying this on purpose, just FYI. Running joke, you know I've never said this right. Algernon, folks. Algernon, Algernon, Algernon. I say it to make you rage. It works incredibly well, does it not? The best in jokes are the ones that make people furious! It's a horrible looking thing. Now, I understand the desire, but here's the thing. So, here's the great scam. Now, I've been looking at the history of all of this, checking to see whether or not there was a plan here. There are a number of things that have set off my alarm bells in my head. And it's not the fact that people are buying this. You buy whatever the hell you want. I don't care. Now, if you get upset by the video, big deal. I'm sorry that some random guy over the internet insulted a large group of people that may or may not have bought that retarded horse. I am so sorry. In comparison to everything else that's going on in the world. Really. In comparison to that, do you really think this is worth getting upset over? Honestly. Some guy compared it to racism. I kid you not. It's racist! This is kind of like racism. Some other guy claimed it was bullying. I'm sorry, I wasn't aware that I was capable of bullying 150,000 people at once. I must be worse than Hitler. Seriously, Hitler was a joke in comparison to me. I could bully people over the internet by putting out a really small 1-minute video that I recorded over the course of 30 minutes. You know what I did with this video? I went onto Mazarigo and said, who's got that retarded horse? And no one responded. It's like, oh, sorry, my mistake. Who's got the Celestial Steed? Well, I can tell you who's got the Celestial Steed. That guy over there. And I'm like, can you ride it for me? I'll give you 200 gold. And I'll make you appear in a video. I will make you a star. And he's like, yeah, absolutely, I'll do that. Where do you want me? Oh, well, let's go outside Ogromar. Here's the 200 gold. Now ride around. Do that little rearing thing that you do. You know, make that happen. Took the video footage. I blacked out his name because I'm not mean, but... Oh, God. Oh, jeez. 13 minutes. I'm able to troll the entire WoW community in 13 minutes. I'm sorry, I am a god! Let's just do this properly. If I am going to be a deity, then I've got to have the proper voice.
I am a god!
Yes, indeed. If I'm able to do that. I'm such a bully, ladies and gentlemen. Bully. To be able to make light of that, racism, the bullying, it's ridiculous. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's hilarious. Welcome to all the new listeners that just tuned in as a result of this video going insanely viral. Ladies and gents, we just broke 50,000 views in 18 hours. That's insane. What a god, man. Anyway, enough of that nonsense. So, here's the grand plan, the scam, the conspiracy. There's a number of odd things that I've noticed about this. Now, I have already spoken of my disdain for the pet store. I think the pet store is absolutely appalling. Really, it's awful. It's the first time that Blizzard ever admittedly sold and put a price on an in-game item. I covered this when it first came out. I don't want to repeat myself too much. But anyone that makes the comparison... yeah, I'm sorry. I should mention more of these stupid things from YouTube and the thread, which is on WoW Europe. And there's one on MMO Champion as well. It's like 20 pages. So... comparisons. People said, how is this any different to paying a subscription? Oh, I don't know. I can think of a few reasons. Because if I pay for that retarded horse, and yet I don't pay for my subscription, then I can't use that retarded horse. That would be one key difference that I can think of off the top of my head. Let me see, other things. Oh, maybe because if I'm paying the $15 a month, that's how much I pay to get access to the service and to use the service. That pays for the... tech support, that pays for the GMs, the continued development of the game, blah, blah, blah. That's how much it was priced at the start. That's how much I expect to pay for the content that's available within it. So it's a dangerous precedent. Now, why is it not different to the TCG stuff? Some other idiot asked. Oh, well, I can think of a few reasons. Firstly, because people that bought the TCG were buying it to play it. Now, if someone decides to buy it not to play it, then that's their own damn fault. I don't care. But the point of the matter is, it's a physical item. Why do you think I was so okay about the plushies that came out recently? Why do you think this is like a brave new world for Blizzard? I thought, I'm so naive. I am so damn naive. I thought that Activision Blizzard had seen the error of their ways and decided to sell a physical item with an in-game bonus, which is fine. That's okay. That's entirely cool. Bought one for my wife. She loves it. What can I say? I was fine with that. I thought this was Blizzard turning over a brave new leaf with innovation in their marketing. Oh, God, I was so wrong. Oh, man. So wrong, ladies and gentlemen. So this is the first time they've sold a mount, and of course they're selling it for $25. That's an absurd amount of money. £17. You know what? I actually went out and tried to spend £17 on my lunch. I couldn't find anywhere within reason that I could buy a reasonable lunch for £17. I would have had to buy something really silly. And I could have got a nice steak. Nice steak in a decent restaurant around there for £17. Not the best steak in the world, but pretty good. I tried to spend it, I couldn't do it. So I spent £7 and then dumped 10 in a charity box. But... it's not even the price that's the worrying thing about this. This, to me, represents a really, really bad direction for the game. I understand selling merchandise. There is a demand for merchandise. I mean, evidently there's demand for that retarded horse as well. And over 100,000 people have this bloody thing. But it's a swindle. You've been hoodwinked. It's a bait and switch. So, here's the thing. If you buy something like this, then you would expect to be kind of unique, right? You'd expect it to be special. How is it special if everyone else has it? Now, there are a number of things that I see as red flags with this whole thing. And don't get me wrong, a lot of this is kind of clever marketing. First thing, you remember back in the day when they had that little pet, the Pandaren? When they were giving that it was a charity thing. They were giving away some of that money to charity. That was cool. Now, I said back in the day, that is a masterstroke of pure evil. You want to know why? Because no one can argue against charity without sounding like a heartless fiend. You can't do it. It's as simple as that. Now, here's the problem. I've spoken to a number of people, and I've had a number of reports from my listeners that have all said the same thing. Because of that, people think that everything in the pet store has a charitable donation attached to it, including that retarded horse. They think that. That's what the marketing did. It's a trick, a bait and switch. And you know what? It's encouraged people to buy it on that basis. Some of the people I told, actually no, there is no charitable donation to this, were shocked. They were like, how could Blizzard be so greedy? Surely they can afford to give some of the money from that retarded horse. I mean, God's sake, $25 times 100,000 people? Do the math. Good lord. It's absurdity. Look at how much money they've just made out of this bloody thing. Absolutely crazy. And it sure didn't cost that much to develop. It's a gold mine. And you know what the problem is? Because it's a gold mine, they're going to do a lot more of it. Way more of it. Now, the second crazy thing, just something that I observed. Remember the X-53 touring rocket? There's a bit of drama about that, but nowhere near as much as about this damn thing. It was mysteriously pushed back. Now, I wonder why that was. Oh, of course. Because you knew that people wouldn't have bought that retarded horse if the X-53 rocket was available, which is significantly cooler. Hey, think about it. How convenient that they pushed it back just around the time that that retarded horse launched onto the store. A little bit crazy, is it not? Now, one other thing that I noticed is this queue system. Now, is it just me? Or are they trying to generate hype? Yeah? They're trying to generate desirability for an item that's really not all that desirable. Oh, it's a queue for an item that's virtual. Okay, I can understand the technical reasons behind it, but don't tell me that there wasn't some kind of marketing ploy at work there. Now, here's the big thing about all of this. I don't care if you buy that retarded horse. I really don't. I don't believe that this is a good way for the game to go. Because it just gives the message. This is the message that's been handed along to Blizzard today. And Activision. You can come up with any old tat, put a price tag on it, pretend that it's desirable, and people will buy it. As opposed to what you were doing before, where you would provide that item as part of the subscription. Now, however small, and this applies to the TCG items as well, I'll go across the board with this one. However small, you're talking about an item that you acquire outside of the game, and is not available to the mainstream unless they want to pay a significant chunk of change to get it. That's a bad precedent. I'm sorry, it is. This is not a free-to-play game. You don't do that. It's just bad form. Taking away development money and taking away items from the general population is a bad thing to do. And it's not going to go anywhere good. But here's the real thing. Here's this big bait and switch. By creating this false demand, by creating this hype, by just fueling this drama, what you've done is you have fooled people into thinking they're getting something cool and unique, and you know what happens when they get on the server? Everyone in the frickin' city is riding these damn things. So what you've done is you've sold people the most common mount in World of Warcraft. Now, I don't know if that is utter complete foolishness or absolute evil maniacal genius. I wanted to go for genius because you know what's going to happen now? They're going to do it again and again and again. And people are going to be fueled to buy these things because too many people are riding that retarded horse. Seriously, you are not unique. You are not a unique and beautiful snowflake. You just spent money on something everybody else has. You look the same as everybody else. You spent real money on this. As opposed to people that buy TCG items because they're kind of rare and kind of unique, you have bought something that over 100,000 people have already bought and more buy every single second. Go and have a look in the Blizzard store right now. I wonder what that queue is like. I cannot imagine. I believe it was something like 90,000 at one point, and still going. According to this, Blizzard has been making $500,000 an hour from this thing. It's ridiculous. Absolutely absurd. And it's all one big scam. Because if you bought this thing, so is everybody else. You are not unique in any respect. This is more common now than that bloody brown bear that everyone was riding on about. And I'll tell you this. There is a desire amongst all WoW players to a greater or lesser extent to be unique and to make their character unique in one way or the other. That's why you try and acquire this stuff. That's why so many people go for these titles, things like that. Because other people don't have them. You want to forge your identity. The identity of your character is vitally important. And by buying into this, all you've done is said, hey, I'm unique, just like everybody else. Dear Lord. My name is TotalBiscuit. You're listening to Blue Please here on cynicalbrit.com. I will be right back after this, folks. Enjoy. You're listening to the podcast, an archive of Blue Please. Music was removed to comply with copyright law. If you'd like to hear the music, tune into the live stream on Fridays at 8 p.m. GMT. That's 3 p.m. EST, only on cynicalbrit.com. Yes, indeed, folks, listen to Blue Please here on cynicalbrit.com with myself, TotalBiscuit. Yes, right, so, if you want to email in for the illusion of choice, you can do so. Email the Moloch at cynicalbrit.com. That is the Moloch at cynicalbrit.com. Get your topic for the last topic of the show, if you so wish. You can also email whatever the hell you like, quite frankly, to that. Just for those of you who are not aware, this will be a double bill. There's going to be another Blue Please tomorrow. It's going to be covering the dev chat. There was a Twitter chat going on tonight, slightly after my show. Deliberate, yes. Coincidence? I think not. Well, we're not going to let that one escape, oh no. So I'm going to be going on tomorrow at 9 p.m. British Standard Time. That's 4 p.m. Eastern. And I'll have a pre-show an hour before that. So you'll have your double Blue Please goodness. I call it two please. Yes, absolutely.
Not one, but two Jormanga worms.
Right. Indeed. Okay. So, I want to talk a little bit about something positive. Because there are positive things, sort of, mainly. Okay, maybe there isn't. Right, so there's one possibly, potentially, maybe positive thing that's going to be happening. So we're going to have a look at this one. Now, they've been putting out some previews of various zones for Cataclysm. And one of these particularly caught my interest. There's a couple of them that didn't. I mean, stuff like Hyjal, it's all lol. I don't care. Like, oh, look, it's Hyjal. There will be quest hubs. Stuff will happen. You will interact with big lore characters. Okay, whatever. Don't care, honestly. Doesn't bring anything new to the table. Seems to be a refinement of what we saw in Wrath, which, it's not a bad thing. Wrath had really good leveling. But, honestly, I'd like to see some innovation. Now, it turns out that they brought that in the form of Vashj'ir. I'm going to have a look. I shall provide you with a link in the show notes on cynicalbrit.com. You can also have a look at it on the website. Just go to worldofwarcraft.com. Have a look at the new raid zones and the new leveling zone previews. it should be right at the top. It's called Sink into Vashj'ir. Have a look at it. It's a very nice looking page, very nicely put together. Have a click on it and we'll talk about what is inside. It's rather mythical, magical, mystical, wonderful by the looks of it. Let's just hope that they don't screw it up. So, Vashj'ir, it's going to be a new zone in Cataclysm. It's a level 78 to 82. So if you get really bored with leveling in Wrath, then let's face it, who wouldn't? And I don't know, I'm sorry, that's a little bit unfair, I guess. Some people might. Honestly, I'm not really a big fan of skipping onto brand new expansion content until you're level capped. I've never really run into a situation where I've had to do it because I don't roll alts. But it seems to me you should exhaust the content that's there before moving on to the rest, because otherwise you'll end up exhausting the new good stuff quicker, and that's not good. So, Vashj'ir, it's a sunken city. It's a level 78 to 82, where players will be able to explore the depths of the Great Sea. Yes, sea, ladies and gentlemen. It's an underwater zone. Right, now things are starting to get a little bit interesting, aren't they? I asked for some innovation, and here we go. So, this thing is underwater. There are some caves that aren't. They sort of pocketed so that water isn't a factor, but the vast majority of this is underwater. Now, you're going to have new underwater travel mechanics, which include submarines. Yes, submarines. Damn, that is a great idea. This is the kind of innovation I want to see. Something new, something awesome. Will we get Big Daddy suits? I'm sorry, but if we get Big Daddy suits, then I will be all over this expansion. I will buy it on the basis of that right now. Big diving suit with green things. Can I have a drill? Could I have a drill arm? There you go. Sold right there. That's all you need to do. Partner up with, what was it, 2K Marin that came up with that game? Give me a drill, give me a big diving suit, and I will be good to go with that. So, how is underwater travel going to work, especially with the combat mechanics there? Well, we don't know. I mean, none of this has been revealed, so let's speculate. So, before I do that, I want to look at the other stuff that's in there. There's going to be 2 new 5-player dungeons, Throne of the Tides and the Abyssal Moor, as well as the first ever opportunity to explore the remains of the majestic city of Vashj'ir. Now, there's a bunch of stupid lore here that I really don't care about, but there are a bunch of screenshots. Oh, wow. Talk about beautiful. It's the best looking WoW screenshots I've ever seen. I mean, I knew they went crazy with the new water effects, but I didn't think they'd go this crazy. I mean, these are gorgeous. I mean, these are really imaginative. I think the nice thing about this is the ability to create an underwater setting that doesn't look like anything else that we've seen before. I mean, we've seen ruins and stuff like that, but we've never seen a fully developed underwater area. And no, what the hell do they call it? Black Fathom Deeps does not count. I mean, this looks really, really good. So, how's underwater going to work? Well, I can think of a few ways. I mean, firstly, I would think that you could take some kind of potion that would allow you to swim around, walk around. If it's all swimming, then I think that people are going to get really sick of it very fast, because the swimming mechanics in WoW are not exactly great. It's like having an entire zone where you're effectively flying, just slower. That's not good. There are submarines. Now, I don't know how these are going to work. I imagine that submarines will act as flight points amongst areas in the zone, which is fine, but that if the vast majority of it's going to be underwater, as opposed to having all of the leveling content and the questing content in caves, which, by the looks of it, it's not going to do. I mean, they said several pocketed undersea caves. Now, there's underwater travel and combat mechanics. I have certain concerns as to the idea of underwater travel and combat mechanics, and the reason being that combat mechanics sounds a little bit too much like, yes, indeed, vehicle combat to me, and we've had enough of that, thank you very much. An entire zone based on this would be really bad indeed. Now, I don't mind the ability to, say, fire the torpedoes at an enemy underwater in a submarine or whatever, but I wouldn't want that to be the majority of the content. I want to use my class, because let's be honest here, firing torpedoes for 2 or even 4 potentially levels is going to be awful. Not looking forward to that at all. But then again, I don't think they're going to do that. I think there will be some kind of mechanic. There might be some quests which involve naval battling and that kind of thing, but I would imagine the majority of it's going to be underwater as per normal. I still don't really know how they're going to play that. I mean, I'm thinking something along the lines of kind of like magnetic space boots. Like, perhaps you would engage something to lock yourself to the floor of the ocean and then just walk around as normal. And maybe you could jump higher, maybe it would be a low-gravity situation. And then maybe you could disengage this lock in order to swim. It does bring around a couple of interesting possibilities, the first of which is the idea of three-dimensional questing. Now, we've seen this to a lesser degree in certain zones, particularly in Wrath. I mean, Storm Peaks would be a good example there. If you've got lots and lots of hills, lots of mountains and things like that, then the verticality of the zone comes into play. However, in reality, we've never had flying combat outside of those bombing runs and the nonsense like that, which actually was vehicle combat. We've never been able to fight properly on top of a mount, and we certainly can't do that on top of a flying mount. All of it is done on the ground. You're just using the mount to fly from one place to the other. So that makes me wonder as to whether or not they're going to develop a system that is effectively underwater flying combat. Now, as to how you would do that, well, I can think of a number of different ways, but the most obvious is that you can swim, and you can also fight, and you can also cast, and enemies can come in from all directions, and you'll have to search for things in all directions and that kind of thing. Now, potentially, that could be a rather seamless way of doing things, although if you're just going to be swimming around, then that's not really all that quick, and of course it's going to take longer to travel from place to place if you're having to deal with 3 dimensions and you're not on a flying mount. The submarines could work, but again, if you're in a submarine, there's really no possibility that you're also going to be firing your attack, your normal casting spells. And certainly if you're a warrior, I mean, what are you going to do? Open a window and poke your sword out at them? That's not going to work, is it? That's ridiculous. So anything that involves submarines has really got to be vehicle-based combat, which isn't very good. We've seen that already. It doesn't work. A lot of people have really spoken out against it. They don't like it, and outside of a gimmick, say a boss encounter or a battleground, it's a bad idea. Having an entire leveling zone based on vehicles is appalling. But, you know, I think the best thing about this, and the thing which really gives me hope for the future, is that this zone is showing a major shift in innovation. Now, the previous zone, Hyjal, you can go and have a read about that. I'll bring up the article momentarily, and I'll tell you a little bit about what they're going to be doing here. So, Mount Hyjal is an upcoming level 78 to 82 zone as well, and it's going to involve a lot of terrain phasing. We've seen that already happening with Wrath of the Lich King, but this is going to be taking that to a whole new level. Now, I don't really see this as much innovation, because this is already there. This is not like underwater combat, which is an innovation. Hyjal is, because it's using this phasing so much, I think what they're trying to do is provide a more cohesive narrative and give you the illusion that you're doing something within the world. This is the thing that I liked about phasing to begin with, but was woefully underused in Wrath of the Lich King. It's like the idea was that it was a gimmick, it was a nascent idea, a little kernel of a thought within Blizzard's mind, and they said, hey, we've got this technology, but we're not really sure what to do with it. Now, the thing that I like about Hyjal, even though it seems like it's a little bit samey, I mean, it's like, fight with the lore characters to do this, this, and this, blah, 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 blah. Right, okay, fine, cool, we've seen that before. But if you have it entirely phased, then what you can do is you can have a big, epic set of quests culminating in something really crazy at the end of the zone, and then you can leave it, and done with it, completely. Now, to me, the increased use of phasing is a response to competition from other games, and one of those, probably the only one that they've really got on their radar right now, is Star Wars The Old Republic. Now, this game effectively, from what I can tell at any rate, there's not been enough information leaked about it. They've been heavily promoting the stuff whereby you have choices, and those choices matter, and you are going through a cohesive narrative with voice acting the same way as the single-player games. That's what they evoke from that. That's the kind of thing that they've shown. Now, to me, phasing is a direct response to that. And the increased use of phasing is an obvious point and an obvious nod to Old Republic and how they plan on beating it at its own game, as it were. Because when you phase, you can do a number of things. The first of that is you can maintain an illusion that you are genuinely progressing through a zone in a way that makes sense. There has been small examples of that in Wrath, but If it's extensive, then we're talking about a gradual change in the environment. So, as to how that can change, well, there's a number of ways. I mean, the whole lore thing is that Hyjal's being attacked by Ragnaros, of all people. I'm not entirely sure how that works, honestly. I mean, we already stole his secrets. Evidently, he's come back for them and wants to burn the tree as some kind of revenge. I don't know what's going on there. But whatever the case, interacting with the major lore characters and gradually pushing back Ragnaros' forces, starting with little skirmishes, culminating in a massive battle at the end, I would hope, is a good way to tell a story. That would, if it's compelling enough, that makes leveling more interesting. Because right now, let's be completely honest, we have the Ds, yeah? We've got, see if I can even remember these, defend, deliver, discover, destroy, and drop. Those are the 5 major Ds. Those 5 Ds are how quests work. Now, you can't really vary those up all that much, honestly. What you can do is make them matter. And I mean matter beyond a piece of quest text saying, oh, this is nice. Because nothing ever changes in the old world. And I think that's what they're really looking to deal with. Use phasing in a way that makes sense and in a way that can progress the story and change the landscape so that it gives you that illusion. You'll never be able to really change the world in that way in WoW. WoW is not dynamic enough for that. We're not talking about things like Eve. I mean, even in games like Eve, where you can make a difference, you're looking at the real changes in the game happen to alliances, yeah? Huge blocks of people, power blocks within the game that change the landscape, the political landscape, the military landscape, the economic landscape. They can change it that way. That's never going to happen in WoW, you've got to accept that. So, to me, the best thing that Blizzard can do is this excessive use of phasing. And I kind of say excessive because I don't know how crazy they're going to go with it. It's good. It brings me hope because I would be interested in leveling through that content. I like RPGs. I like a story. But stuff like WoW and indeed most MMOs, they don't do it properly because their storytelling is just barely even there. You know, if I go and do a quest, I want to see a change later on. If I play Mass Effect 2, for instance, I make a decision in that affects something else later on in the game. Now, you can't really do that with WoW and have it affect everyone, but you can have it affect you. Choices. Now, I don't know whether or not this is going to be performance-based. I would imagine not. The chances are you're going to be able to beat this no matter what the cost. But I'll tell you what, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be absolutely fantastic if some of this stuff was performance-based? If the damage that was done to Hyjal was directly related to your performance? And yeah, maybe only you can see that. Maybe it's only cosmetic. Maybe it's just this bit of ground is burned where otherwise it wouldn't be. But wouldn't that make you feel like you'd actually done something worthwhile that made an impact on the world, even if it's only a charade, only an act, a mirage? I'd be cool with that. Honestly, I really would. My name is TotalBiscuit. You're listening to Blue Please here on CynicalBrit.com. Be right back after the break to talk a little bit about the Blizzard Battleplan, which has told us effectively nothing, but it gives us a nice chance to have a look back at what happened in Wrath of the Lich King, the successes and failures thus far. I'm going to play you a little bit of Nightwish because Nightwish is fantastic. This one goes by the name of the Kinslayer. Enjoy. You're listening to the podcast, an archive of Blue Please. Music was removed to comply with copyright law. If you'd like to hear the music, tune into the live stream on Fridays at 8 p.m. GMT. That's 3 p.m. EST, only on CynicalBrit.com. Yes, indeed, folks. You're listening to Blue Please. You're on CynicalBrit.com with myself, TotalBiscuit. So we've been talking about various things, and I was happy to be a little bit positive about how I see Cataclysm coming. However, Wrath of the Lich King, I will happily say, is by far... Well, I say happily. I'm never happy when Blizzard screws up, because that affects everybody, myself included. And a funny thing is that a lot of people seem to think that I want the downfall of Blizzard. No, I don't! How could I have a WoW podcast without Blizzard? That would be terrible. Wouldn't even work. Absolutely disgraceful. I want Blizzard to succeed. It's in all of our best interests. Really, it is. So, there is one thing that I would like to look at. I don't really know why they released this, honestly. It tells me basically nothing. Every now and again they put out something called a Battleplan, and this Battleplan is supposed to tell you where they've gone and where they're going, and give out a bit of information as to that effect. Unfortunately, they seem to have forgotten to do that. It has nothing, absolutely nothing of any use whatsoever in this particular post. But let's try and make it useful, try and make it interesting anyway. So, all that was really said that was of any great note was something about them upgrading their databases. Whoopity frickin' do, who cares, nobody, simple as that. It is not remotely interesting. But they did mention quite a bit about the history of Wrath and how things have been going with that. And they went through all the way to present day, and I have to wonder why. I mean, do you really want to celebrate that? I mean, half of Wrath was awful, honestly. And pretty much considered to be the worst expansion that they've ever put out. Admittedly, there's only been 2 of them in terms of WoW. But this... why celebrate it? I don't get it. Why celebrate Wrath of the Lich King of all things? Why not just do what I thought they were doing anyway, which was simply to just go forward and say, we're just going to forget about this. We're just going to completely and totally forget about Wrath of the Lich King. We don't care. We're going to look forward to Cataclysm because, honest guys, it's going to be better, really. This is going to be the thing that brings you back. I mean, surely that's what you want to be doing, I would think. But apparently not. Evidently, they would quite like to dwell on the mysteries of the past, talk about Wrath of the Lich King. I don't know why. Right, so let's have a look at Wrath of the Lich King. Let's have a look at the start of Wrath of the Lich King. What was good, what wasn't? Well, first things first. Raids. God. Raiding at the start of Wrath, ladies and gentlemen. Good lord. Absolutely appalling. So here's what they have to say about it. From the moment of entry into Northrend, the story began to play out and the heroes of Azeroth were asked to take on the challenge the Lich King and the Scourge presented them. Players were able to experience Naxxramas as a level 80 dungeon and face down another old god Yogg-Saron in Ulduar. In order to better prepare for the trials facing them in Icecrown, the Argent Crusade set up camp in Icecrown to hold the tournament to hone the Azeroth's finest heroes into a force the Lich King couldn't afford to ignore. That's all they want to say about it. Yeah, about a line per each. Naxxramas. Big disaster or biggest disaster? You decide. Pretty freaking awful disaster one way or the other. That's all I can say about it. A joke. What is it? I can't remember the quote. It's so stupid. A joke played upon their creations by their own creators. Something something Ken. Something something Barbie. Ugh. Death Whisper. Worst voice actor. Yeah, you can put that down as a black mark in Cataclysm. The woman who voiced Death Whisper and Syndra Goza. Please don't give that woman any money ever again. Lord, I don't know what she was playing at. And whoever wrote her lines. Wow. Anyway, Naxxramas, awful. Mazrigo is an awful server, honestly, but Malygos, alright, not terrible. However, Malygos was the first example of a vehicle fight within a raid. Now, there was another vehicle fight, and that was, of course, in the Oculus. Isn't it odd? Maybe it's not. That people consider Oculus to be the worst 5-man, and people also consider the third phase of Malygos to be frickin' awful. What does that give the indication of exactly, Blizzard? Tell me, why did you think these vehicles were a good idea, especially in a raid environment? People hated these damn things, and I can't exactly blame them. So I would consider that to be something of a failure. Now, the vehicle mechanics were evolved for Ulduar, and they made things a little bit more interesting. Thankfully, they were only used in one fight. That is also a good thing indeed. There were no vehicles in Icecrown, with the exception of the abomination that you possess in Professor Putricide. I suppose you count that as a vehicle, as fed with the same mechanics. You can't really count the airship battle. That was something different. But overall, vehicles, I have to say, outside of leveling content, have been pretty much a disastrous failure for Blizzard. Nothing really to be proud of there. And it's funny that you don't really hear any mention of vehicles for Cataclysm. That's not part of the marketing at all. Funny that. I can't imagine why they wouldn't mention a much derided, much decried, and much disliked mechanic from Wrath of the Lich King. However, there were good things from the first tier of raiding. The first official hard mode was implemented in the form of Sotharian, and it paved a wonderful, wonderful path for the future, or so we thought. Sotharian, a binary hard mode. You could try it with no 1, 2, or 3 drakes. It would yield different rewards. The top one considered to be the only hard encounter in the entirety of Tier 7, and indeed the only one that held up any guild of any repute for more than an hour, was of course Sotharian 3 drakes in both 10 and 25-man mode. Also one of the only encounters to demonstrate that 10-man hard modes could be as hard, if not harder, in fact, than the 25s. That, again, very important. That's something that did not exist back in Burning Crusade, which introduced 2 of those 10-man dungeons, Zolaman and Karazhan. Neither of those dungeons had something that was sufficiently challenging to say, hey, 10-man stuff's kind of hard too, right? When even pre-nerf Karazhan wasn't a candle on pre-nerf Grawl, and certainly not pre-nerf Mactheridon. Those are 2 important things to take from Wrath. Those are the things that I hope that they look at and bring into Cataclysm. The problem is that they decided to phase out these non-binary hard modes in favour of binaries. And of course, the prime example of that is another terrible instance. Yep, all of the odd tiers in Wrath are awful. Yeah, really bad. All of the even tiers are good, well, to some degree. And Ulduar, I think most people can agree, is the crowning glory of raiding within Wrath of the Lich King. A large, innovative dungeon with a lot of different mechanics, really cool story, the environment particularly awesome. Again, a little bit too big in my opinion, and I've said before, and I could say it again 1,000 times until I'm red in the face. I believe dungeons should not be that long anymore. They should be split into smaller dungeons, at least just to provide a change of scenery. Because being in that dungeon and having the only dungeon on that tier is bad. And there's another example of something that absolutely ruined Wrath raiding for me in a really big way. It took me down to a casual level, because I only want to raid casually because I can't stand the look of these places. 1 instance per tier. Really. Now there's the odd example of, say, oh, well, there's VOA. Well, we don't count that. Oh, there's an Ixia. We don't count that either, because that's a dumb gimmick that we've seen 1,000 times already. Aside from Tier 7, at this point in time, there's just nothing else. There's nothing else on the other tiers. There's nothing else on Tier 8, nothing else on Tier 9, nothing else on Tier 10. There's something coming on Tier 10, but that's a little bit too late, isn't it? This idea of single dungeon tiers is awful and should be horribly abandoned. Thankfully, that looks like what they're doing in Cataclysm. They've realised that that's a bad thing, and they have got 4 raid dungeons ready for launch. 2 6s, a 4, and a 1. To me, that says that they have an opportunity to launch with 2 tiers of content at release and still have reasonable sets. I mean, say, for instance, you could have a 6 and a 4, or indeed, how about one of the 6s and a 1 and one of the 6s and a 4? And maybe the 6 and a 1 as the first tier of content and the 6 and a 4 as the second tier. There's a lot of options there, honestly. Abandoning the single-tier raid system is, in my opinion, extremely important for keeping people interested in raiding. It's not good. Now, I would also like to see non-binary hard modes brought over to Cataclysm, but I don't see that happening, again, just because Blizzard has come out and said, we think this is the best way. They're wrong, incidentally, and the reason they're wrong is because no sane player wants a game that only has 2 difficulty modes, easy and hard. Because if someone wants to play in the middle, someone wants to play normal, or maybe a bit hard, or slightly easier, they should have that option. What we're talking about is a stratification of the player base in a way that is not good. A very strict and very drawn apart stratification. You've got a block up here of the elite guys that do the 25-man heroic stuff, which constitute, not an awful lot. I think it's something like 1 to 2% of the raiding player base max, according to guildprogress.com. And then you've got all these guys that can only do the normal stuff, and then you've got this big block in the middle. Now, some might argue, oh, it's fine, you can just do normals, then do hards. No, it's not fine. You have to make a massive leap, and you're also asking people, and this is another thing I want to see gone, quite frankly, to play normals in order to do hards. For God's sake, balance it in a way that allows us to do hards from the start. I think gear dependence should not be that much of a factor when you're dealing with hard modes, honestly. You should not have to prep for hard modes by doing normals. It's like saying, oh, you as a player of a game, you got to play the easy mode in order to play the hard mode. I hate it when games do that. It's awful. But in this case, it's more of, you got to play easy to play the hard, but there's no normal that you could do in the meantime that might be a bit challenging for you. I mean, the difficulty level of ICC is all over the place, but it comes down to the fact that I would have preferred to start on hard modes, make slower progress through that, and feel a genuine amount of accomplishment from killing that stuff, rather than mucking about on easy. So, this pseudo-attunement, this idea that you've got to attune to hards by doing normals, get rid of that, just go away with that. That's a bad idea. It serves no practical purpose. I've said it before, I'll say it again, you got rid of attunements for one reason, to let people fail on their own terms. Not to restrict people. I mean, this is one of the things that I hated from TBC, so why bring it back in some kind of stealth format? Get rid of that for Cataclysm. Let people start with heroic modes from the very start. Now, what else? Bad things from Wrath. 5-man dungeons. Absolutely appalling. A huge step backwards from TBC. Some interesting stuff, but overall, too freaking easy. And therein lies the problem. It sounds like I'm beating a dead horse. A dead horse, you say? Yes, indeed. Beating a dead, retarded horse over this particular issue, but it's true. Everyone accepts that it's true. The heroic 5-mans are AoE fests. They're awful. Now, LFD was brought in, which, quite frankly, was designed for one reason alone, to get people back into these things, because no one wanted to do them anymore, because they suck. They're terrible. So it's like, here's badges, here, shove all of that stuff on there as well. And another thing, there's so many bad things about Wrath, I'm sorry, I've got very little positive to say about this particular expansion. The idea of giving people all of this gear through badges that they clearly have not earned is ridiculous. And I say it right here, if you are not a raider, you don't need raid gear. If you are... I said it in a thread, and someone actually reacted badly to this. And it was in a thread whereby someone was complaining that Malagos was too hard. Yes, I kid you not. Too hard for the weekly. They wanted it taken out because people didn't know what to do. And my response is this: if you can't do tier 7 content, you don't deserve tier 10 items. Which is what you get from doing the weekly stuff. You get those frost badges which can be traded in for that. That needs to go, quite frankly. If you want to gear up alts in an easy manner, then what you've got to do is you have to ensure that there is some kind of BOA system that allows you to donate gear down to your other alts that you have legitimately earned. I'm fine with that. It's like you phase out all of this gear anyway, just give it as hand-me-downs, things like that. Now, one other thing that I would really like to see happen is changes made to earlier tier dungeons. And by dungeons, I'm talking about raids. Who the hell runs Naxxramas outside of the weekly? Nobody. Absolutely nobody. So, a new player doesn't get to experience any of this content. This content is obsolete to a lot of these guys. Nobody runs Ulduar anymore. No one runs Naxxramas anymore. Very few people run TOC. Because, of course, you don't need to. You can get all of the gear that you need to start ICC by running 5-mans. That is a disgrace. Why abandon the content? I've always been a proponent of somehow allowing people to get some benefit from raid dungeons, even if they're below level. I mean, I had an idea about getting leveling groups into raid dungeons in order to level up. Has that happened? Well, no, not really. Variation is required on older raid content in order to get people back into it. Some kind of incentive to make sure the new players get to have a bash at it. As to what that is, well, that's for Blizzard to come up with. I'm sure I can come up with something by next week's show. My name is TotalBiscuit, you're listening to Blue Please, and I have the illusion of choice coming up right after this break. I'll be right back. Enjoy. You are listening to the podcast, an archive of Blue Please. Music was removed to comply with copyright law. If you'd like to hear the music, tune into the live stream on Fridays at 8 p.m. GMT. That's 3 p.m. EST, only on cynicalbrit.com. Yes, indeed, folks, the illusion of choice. Look at my glass. My glass is amazing. Give it a lick and then be taken to hospital. Right, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about a subject that a listener has come up with. This is a cool idea. So, I was complaining about the lack of variety in single-tier raid dungeons. They're talking about the idea that raids don't work in a single-tier environment if it's only one raid per tier. Now, that's the definition of single-tier right there. At least that's the one I came up with. I don't care about anyone else's definition. Quiet, you. So, how would you change that? Well, there's a compromise. And this guy kind of hit the nail on the head. I'd like to talk about this a little bit. It's from Dregsy, also known as Darniel, in the chat room, and he says this: TB, this is my first time listening live in 5 years. Wow, welcome to the show. What a show we had for you today. Hopefully you will come back and join in the lively chat community, or the lively hat community. Whichever the case. Right, so he says this: although I'm worried by the people in the chat room, yes, I'm sure you are. Anyway, the illusion of choice, I wanted to give an idea for raids and hear people's thoughts. Think of the Black Temple raid in BC. We all remember that. The 10th start as we went through the pipes opened by Vash, and we snuck into the Citadel to hunt down the dark being that was Illidan. But what if we had a choice of entrance to make the story for ourselves? Perhaps it would add a third degree of raiding. For instance, instead of sneaking through the pipes, you could do a full frontal breach through the gates, and the bosses would all involve an assault with NPC characters around you, fighting to take control of the courtyards. Hard modes could be various defense systems, such as archers, tar pools, and similar fires to avoid. You go via the battlements, or go from a higher point and sneak past sentry-type bosses. This is all based around a fortress castle-type dungeon, like Ulduar, ICC, or the Black Temple. But what's your opinion of having various routes into a raid towards the final set of bosses? You can choose and vary up the raid from week to week. Also, a shout out to Shakam on Shatar EU for being the best mate for many a year. That's from Dregsy or Darnell. I like the idea of varying up the raid, let me put it that way. I mean, personally, I wouldn't make it so gimmicky, per se. I understand why you would, but I would make it a little, just less gimmicky. Think about it this way. What happens if you have a instance with a set number of bosses in, but you only do certain ones every time? What happens if you have an instance, let's have a thing, like this? I mean, even if you just did it this way, this would kind of change things up. So, you've got an instance which is 6 bosses, and they are arranged in this configuration. Firstly, you got your first boss. You always have to kill this guy. At which point you have a branching path. You have to choose one way or the other, and it's a choice that you have to make at that point. Now, you'll be given information as to what you might find down there, and of course you can use the system in order to have a look and see what loot is available. By the system, of course, I mean anything. Use any mod, anything like Wowhead, something like that. So, you do that. You pick your choice, and then you have 2 bosses from that wing, quote-unquote. The other wing, at that point, for some contrived reason, becomes closed off. Maybe, I don't know, I can't think of a reason. Maybe it caves in or some nonsense like that. I mean, for God's sake, everyone dies in a raid instance on a weekly basis. You can cave in half the instance. It's not going to make a difference. It'll be back the way it was next week. So do that. Make the choice. Make it timed to really annoy people. Make the choice and then go through there and then fight a final boss one way or the other. Now, that means that you'll fight 4 out of 6 bosses. Now, you could also vary it up perhaps by giving an opportunity to switch paths. The problem you're going to have with a system like this is that, well, there's 2 problems. First thing is this. Loot. If you have different loot for each bosses, you're going to get a bit of a battle, a bit of a fight between the 2 wings, per se, in your guild. You're going to have some people who are going to go for one of them, some people are going to go for the other, simply because, hey, loot is there, blah, blah, blah. Which I know. I mean, I understand. That makes sense. Now, the problem is, if you try and resolve that by giving them a shared loot table, then people will take the path of least resistance. They'll go for the boss that is easiest. So, you run into a bit of a catch-22 there. If you want to try and fix the idea that your guild is going to be split in half, wanting to go one way or the other, then you've got to share the loot system. But you can't share the loot system because then there is no choice. The choice disappears. It becomes path of least resistance. I would personally take the guild drama of the choice over the idea that you could just go for the easiest boss and completely negate those other bosses. I think the problem is with that as well, that you go into a development cycle thinking, we want to make the most complete, time-consuming experience possible to keep people going, keep people subscribed till the next raid. Which makes sense, honestly. I don't blame them for that at all. But you got to look at the big picture, and the big picture, ladies and gentlemen, is quite simply this. If I get sick of a raid in a month, as opposed to sick of a raid in 2 months, then it doesn't matter if I'm fighting 10 bosses or 2. You can extend the lifespan of a raid dungeon by giving me multiple ways to do it. I like to see it happen. Choose your own adventure in a raid dungeon. Why not? My name is TotalBiscuit. You've been listening to Blue Please here on CynicalBrit.com. Thank you ever so much for listening. Go check out the rest of the shows on CynicalBrit.com. Daily gaming shows, videos. I've got Shoutcraft coming up later, ladies and gents, in an hour and a half. Go check it out on live stream. Yes, indeed. tinyurl.com/shoutcraft for that. I'd like to see as many of you as possible in the live chat room for that one. Watch the live video. I can guarantee you it will be a fantastic experience for all of you. I'll give a couple of shout-outs before the end of the show. Send me them via the chat room or email me, themurloc@gmail.com. That is themurloc@gmail.com. Or tweet me if you so desire on Twitter. That's @TotalBiscuit. Only a couple of minutes, folks. I don't have a lot of time left. In fact, we've run over time already. Too much of that retarded horse, as far as I'm concerned. It's terrifying, isn't it? So, I've got a couple of shout-outs here, and I will make a start with them right now. I'll get myself back into the chat room, because somehow I've managed to drop out of it. I'm not entirely sure how that happened. Now, the first shout-out has to go out to Drewby once again. Go check out his video. tinyurl.com/thegrind3trailer. That's tinyurl.com/thegrind3trailer. Go do it right now. Go and have a look at it. Watch it after the show. Also, hi to Nagranol, who has shown his beardy face in the chat room. And directly below him is Gnomewise, who looks like a slightly less scary version of Nagranol. Terrifying, really, isn't it? Yes, they could have been separated at birth. Yes, indeed. Right, shout out to Rawcast. Yes, indeed. The Rawcast Show. And to Bound on US Staggerhelm. Yes, indeed. They have down Syndragoza, which I must say is something we haven't managed to do. Then again, we've barely raided. I'll give a shout-out as well to Jason from Insidia.com. There you go. Shout-out for you. He is the guy that helped us out in the first month with the web hosting solution. So thank you very much to Jason. Go check out his work on Insidia.com. It is absolutely fantastic. Oh, more shout-outs here. One to Spivey, or indeed from Spivey. TB, you arrogant, elitist, black-hearted son of a cleft-hoof salesman. I wasn't aware there was a market for cleft-hoof. A shout to Captain Dan and the Scurvy crew, because Ship to Ship is the perfect background music for the gunship battle. I would have to agree with that. I don't think there's a lot of argument to be had there. Shout-out to the Cynical Chat, which is complete win, and a shout-out to the most epic of the ugly mounts in WoW right now, that retarded horse. That's from Sephiric. Yes, indeed, you can have it. You can have it indeed. What else have we got? Where's that chat room? It's disappeared. Oh, God. Shout out to thegreedygoblin.blogspot.com, plugging his stuff. I believe, if I remember correctly, that is a fellow involved in Cataclysm. Yes, Cataclysm, which is a new podcast by Thunderer and Co. You might remember that we wanted to get Thunderer in to do Pug. That was before WoW Radio dissolved. He's doing his own thing now. Go check it out, Cataclysm. It's easy enough, just go and Google it. There's not an awful lot of Cataclysm there. A shout out to Striped Socks on Daggerspine. Let Us Down, Putri Hard Mode. That's from Jera Gathiel. A shout out because it's a shout out from Zelathalis. Yes, there you go, you can have it. A shout out to Hope and Despair, who can't make the video chat today. And a shout out to Deadly Poet Society on Emerald Dream EU. And to Cheese, that's from B. Woodward. Right, how about done, ladies and gents? thank you very much for having a look at the show today. If you're new to the show, go check out the archives on iTunes or on cynicalbrit.com. Click the shows button, and you'll be directed to downloads for all of that stuff. And go watch my video if you haven't already. Go have a look at it, youtube.com/totalhalibut. Everyone else seems to have looked at it by this point. You wouldn't want to miss out. You wouldn't want to be unique. No, indeed not. And don't buy that retarded horse, ladies and gentlemen. And don't let your friends do it either. Friends, do not let friends buy that retarded horse. Thank you for listening. I'll see you on Shoutcraft tonight. Goodbye. You have been listening to the podcast and archive of Blue Please, WoW's #1 shock jock show, only on cynicalbrit.com. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment on the Cynical Brit website or write a review of the show on iTunes. Thank you for listening, and I'll